Yes. So the topic that we are starting today is the properties of compounds. All right. We have done with the definition and characteristics of compounds in the early classes. Let me give a very short recap of the definition of a compound. Now, what is compound? Compound is a substance that is made when you add two or more elements in it. All right. Whenever two or more elements are combined together, a compound is made. All right. Compound basically gives a proper structure or a proper definition of combining two or more elements. जब भी दो या दो से ज्यादा elements बन जाते हैं और फिर जो substance create होता है, that substance is known as compound. Now, when we talk, there are different types of compounds, all right, as we have read earlier, like common salt, sand, dry ice, chalk, sugar, and polythene. These are all those things which are made when we add two elements in it. For example, I'm just giving you a quick short recap of it, right? If we take the example of chalk, so chalk is made by adding calcium, carbon, and oxygen, and hence calcium, carbon, and oxygen are elements. So chalk would be known as your compound. यानी कि इन तीन elements को मिलके ये chalk बन गया. Now, on the other hand, we have the example of polythene, a kind of a plastic, right? That is made by adding carbon and hydrogen. Now, since carbon and hydrogen are elements, and when we have added both these elements in order to make one compound, so a compound is going to be your polythene, right? This is the definition and few examples of compound. I hope that you got it. All right. हम लोगों ने पहले ही पढ़ लिया था. Now there are some properties. All right. Now what do you mean by properties? Like characteristics. उसकी कुछ चीजें होती हैं compounds की specific जिसकी वजह से वो compound कहलाते हैं, right? There are different properties of it. Let me just share it with you the ones which are similar. ठीक है, अलग अलग compounds की अलग अलग properties होती हैं. There are different kinds of compounds, and all of these different compounds have their different properties, but collectively, if you are going to just put all of them together, then there are few, like 6 to 8 properties which can be shared similar basis. ठीक है, कुछ properties ऐसी हैं जो similarly सारे compounds में मिलती हैं. We are only going to go with those properties because अगर हम individually जाएंगे तो वो कभी भी खत्म नहीं होंगी. As you know that there are more compounds than an elements, और elements ही इतने ज्यादा हैं, उससे ज्यादा compounds हैं तो बहुत ज्यादा time लग जाएगा. All right. Hence, in order to save our time, we are only going to go with these properties which have the similar things in it. Now, number one is properties of compounds are usually different from their component elements. अब जब हम property की बात करते हैं ना compounds की, यानी कि जब हम इनके characteristics की बात करते हैं, so one thing that we need to keep in mind are that whatever elements that is added into the compounds has exactly the opposite properties of those elements. For example, if we take calcium and hydrogen as an example, calcium और hydrogen हमने element की example ले ली. अगर आप इन दोनों से मिला के कोई एक कंपाउंड बना रहे हैं ना, तो उस कंपाउंड की प्रॉपर्टीज, उस कंपाउंड की खुसूसियात, उसकी खासियत बिल्कुल डिफरेंट होंगी उसके एलिमेंट से. All right. Whatever properties that element share is going to be totally different from the properties that of its compound. All right, that is the number one and the most common point. Then over here in the next picture, here are a few more. Let me first zoom it out for you all. There are 3 more here. Yes, number one, each compound has unique physical and chemical properties. You need to keep this in mind. All the compounds that you have has a different shape and a different property. Physically भी different होते हैं, chemically भी different होते हैं. Now, number two, a compound has properties that differ from the properties of element that make up the compound. Again, the same point, the most easiest, as I have explained earlier. Now, number three, elements always join a specific ratio to form a specific compound. Now, अब इसमें ratio की हम बात करते हैं. For example, element का जो एक ratio होगा. For example, if in a thing there is 4% of element, all right, so the ratio of the compound will also be 4 to 5% only. All right, यानी कि जिन चीजों से वो पूरा कंपाउंड बन जाएगा, तो एलिमेंट का रेशियो एंड द रेशियो ऑफ कंपाउंड्स विल बी इन अ extent or in a proportions amount. ऐसा नहीं होगा कि element का ratio, for example, if the ratio of an element can be 60 and the ratio of compound will be 2. No, the ratio has to be similar. All right, उसकी जो quantity होगी वो similar होगी, उसकी जो properties होंगी वो एक तरह से similar होंगी, बहुत ज़्यादा ups and downs उसमें नहीं होंगी. Then third one, yes, each compound has its own physical property, बिल्कुल अलग physical property होती है. For example, if you are going to take these examples of compounds, उनकी जो physical properties होती हैं, उनके जो physical features होते हैं, जिस तरह से वो दिख रही होती हैं, that is totally different. For example, colors, their shape, their sizes, the volume of mass, everything will be different from each other. Number two, can be identified by can be identified by chemical properties. Of course, if you don't know how to name them and if you cannot identify them, what you can do is you can get into their physical or into their chemical properties. For example, अगर आप उसको chemical में change करोगे तो आपको पता चल जाएगा that how this compound has made. For example, in order to know that how water has made, you need to put the formula of the water. And in order to put the formula of the water, you need to join two different elements into it. By adding two different elements, by adding the chemicals of two different elements, you would come to know the chemical reactions of the water. Now, number three, a compound's property different from the elements that is formed. Again, the same thing. अच्छा, कुछ चीजें repetitions में इसलिए आ रही हैं because as I have told you earlier that the properties of compounds are different to the ones in specific. ठीक है, specific अगर हम properties की बात करेंगे तो हर compound की अपनी अपनी अलग properties होती हैं, but we are not going to get into it. कोई भी नहीं जा सकता because compounds are infinite. बहुत ज्यादा हैं compounds, unquantity उनकी जो quantity है वो uncountable है. All right. So this is the reason that we cannot get into the properties of it. So we need to get only with the ones that who shares same properties. ठीक है, जिनकी same properties होती हैं, हम सिर्फ उनकी बात करेंगे. And if we talk about the same properties, then there are compounds are formed by chemical reactions. Number one, compounds can only be broken down into simpler substances by chemical reactions. Of course, जो अभी हम शुरू से पढ़ते आ रहे हैं, we can break compounds into simpler substances. हम उसको break कर सकते हैं, ठीक है, क्योंकि compound दो chemical से बना होता है. This is the reason we can break compound very easily. Now, number three is the different elements in a compound are joined together in a fixed proportion by mass. Again, the ratio one, वही वाली बात आ गई, ठीक है ना? And then the different elements in a they have properties which are different from those of their elements. ठीक है, उनके जो properties होती हैं, उनके elements से totally different होती हैं. So these are 3 to 4 properties that they share similarly among each other.